The next big form of learning that we need to talk about will be social and observation learning. Just briefly, you may be familiar with the idea of a meme. So there's this guy who sells beer on TV who most certainly is not the most interesting man in the world. But all over the internet, there are these little takeoffs on that. A few months ago, I know there was this activity called planking, where you would go out and have pictures taken of yourself doing planking. That was the same sort of thing. So it's a unit of, in a broader sense, it's a unit of knowledge transmitted within a culture. Your book talks about a monkey, I think in Japan, Emo, that for whatever reason at some point started washing its sweet potatoes before it would eat it. And all the other monkeys learned from that, and now it's a culturally transmitted behavior amongst the monkeys in that particular place. It's not something they were doing before, but now they do. So those monkeys and their fads. Observational learning, which is of more interest to us, is the acquisition or modification of a behavior after exposure to at least one performance of that behavior. The acquisition or modification of a behavior after exposure to at least one performance of the behavior. What does that mean? Well, if you look at Emo, it's literally monkey see, monkey do. The classic study for us that you absolutely want to make sure that you're familiar with was from Bandura. So what Bandura was interested in, could children acquire behavior through observation? And what he did with his team was he divided his subjects into two groups. One group of children were shown a video of adults playing with a Bobo doll. So a Bobo doll is kind of like this big Weeble, if you remember Weebles. They wobble, but they don't fall down. This is kind of a big balloon character with sand in the bottom. If you smack it, it'll come back up and all that sort of thing. The first group of subjects saw adults playing with the Bobo doll quietly. The second group saw video of the adults attacking the Bobo doll. And this is what this looks like. So you see, up here in the first row, you have the adults and beating up the Bobo doll, and then the outcome you see down here. I actually think this little girl, I really want to know what happened to her, because if you look closely here, she appears to be going after the Bobo doll with a hammer. So I'm sure that was an exciting marriage for somebody eventually. So what happened? Well, I've given it away. When the children were allowed to play with the Bobo doll after viewing the videos, those who saw the aggressive or violent behavior were more than twice as likely to act aggressively toward the doll than those who had watched the quiet behavior. And so, from this, Bandura concludes that exposing children to violence may cause them to behave aggressively. I wouldn't say so much that they would view it as more acceptable, but that they just thought that's what they were supposed to be doing. So if you've ever watched any 5-year-old kid, he wants to dress like Dad, so if Dad wears boots, kid has to have boots. If Dad has a big belt buckle, kid has to have a big belt buckle. If Dad loves football, the kid loves football. It's just that kind of, it's a very important form of learning for a social species. Watch girls, they do the same things. So this takes us to the idea of modeling being important. And modeling is just the imitation of behavior through observational learning. And it's not just children who do this. I want you to think back, not that long ago, for most of you, if this is your first semester, to your first week of classes. Let's go back to that first day of classes here on campus. You weren't sure how to behave probably. You weren't really sure how to dress. You weren't sure how things worked. What did you do? You looked around you. You might have, if you were lucky, you might have had a friend who already comes to school, who kind of walks you through it and says, okay, do this, do that. This is probably a good time to get rid of your high school letterman's jacket. That's not going to be that cool. All those kinds of things. That's through modeling. Professionally, the same thing happens. When new day on the job, you kind of look around to see what's going on. Here's another way you can think about this. Imagine that through whatever set of circumstances needed for this, your candidate for the White House wins. And you get invited to the inauguration ball. Woohoo! Party in D.C. And part of this ball is a fancy dinner. So you sit down, and you've got 2 forks, several kinds of spoons. Things are across the front. You've been there, right? You're trying to figure out now, is that my glass or is that their glass? And this doesn't matter if you're at Fried Green Tomatoes all that much, but you're not at Fried Green Tomatoes. You're at the White House. How are you going to solve this problem if you don't already know the etiquette? Look around and see what people do. And hope that you're at a table with either people who are so socially inept nobody knows, or that you're at a table where people know and you can kind of catch on what's going on. It's fascinating if you're ever in that kind of circumstance, just to kind of watch how people adapt. But it's all modeling. And it's important to us as a species. Because if you go back and you think, we've talked about this before, we've alluded to this, if you're the wildebeest on the Serengeti, your mom is pregnant, she has you, bango, you're on the Serengeti. 15 minutes later, you're up and going. Mom gives you a few licks and a kick, and you're in business. You know most of what you need to know. We don't. We're social animals. Most of what we know is not instinctual. Most of what we know is socially acquired. So that's modeling. And what also makes modeling powerful, not just watching other people and figuring out what to do, but this notion of vicarious reinforcement. Vicarious reinforcement. And the idea basically behind vicarious reinforcement is being able to learn through the mistakes of others, or being able to learn through the successes of others. To be able to watch someone else either do something and be punished for it, or someone do something else and be rewarded for it, is enormously powerful. It's enormously powerful. If you have a hero, if you have someone that you aspire to be like, this is vicarious reinforcement acting. And it can be a very good thing. it can be a very bad thing, depending on who the individual checks.